Okay, so we're going to start off in Nehemiah chapter 4 today. That's where our key verses for the lesson come. So Nehemiah chapter 4, starting in verse 10. And Judah said, "The strength of the bearers of burdens is decayed, and there is much rubbish, so that we are not able to build the wall." And our adversaries said, "They shall not know, neither see, till we come in the midst among them, and slay them, and cause the work to cease." And it came to pass, that when the Jews which dwelt by them came, they said unto us 10 times, "From all places whence ye shall return unto us, they will be upon you. Therefore set I in the lower places behind the wall, and on the higher places I even set the people after their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and rose up, and said unto the nobles, and to the rulers, and to the rest of the people, Be not ye afraid of them, remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your houses." So, we face our own battles in raising families just like they did back thousands of years ago. And it's important for us as parents that we become good examples to set our Christian homes up so that our children can lead a godly life. But there's a lot of things that get in the way. There's a lot of battles that we have to face, just like Nehemiah did back in his day. Although Nehemiah was a foreigner, he had a position of great trust in his office as cupbearer to the king of Persia. He was greatly burdened when he received a report about the conditions in which the Jews that went back to Jerusalem were living. So Nehemiah asked for and received permission to return and rebuild the wall around the city. The wall was both a literal and symbolic protection. Nehemiah had both a burden and a vision. That vision was for more than just rebuilding a wall. He recognized the wall was necessary for worship to continue in the temple that was being rebuilt for the people to remain safely inside the city. Now, when Nehemiah challenged the people of Israel to fight for their sons and daughters, he was reminding them of the vital fact that the battles they faced would change the lives of future generations. And so, like we say, freedom is always one generation away. If we aren't raising up our children to go the right way, then how are they going to raise their children to go the right way? So it's up to us. We have to make sure that we're doing that every day. It's not something that can, you just come Sunday morning and then hope, okay, everybody's got their spiritual filling for the whole week, and that we don't have to have daily devotions or be leading our children. So it's something that it's a daily fight. Nehemiah recognized there was a battle in this day, not just for the people he was leading, but also for the next generation, and it's the same for us today. So number 1 in your workbooks on lesson 8 here is fight your spiritual battles. So those blanks would be spiritual battles. Before you put a plan in place to work on your children, you must first take stock and inventory of your own life. Taking a look in the mirror, because it's like monkey say, monkey do. So you can't just say one thing and then live your life another way. It's a tragedy when a parent's not tending to their own heart. Before you fight to defend your children, fight the battle within your own heart. A man once told his congressman, "I believe we should put prayer back in public schools." The congressman replied and said, "I'm a Christian as well, and I agree with you. But let me ask you, did you pray with your children at home this morning?" I think that's a good example of some of the people I see, they feel like the school, they get mad when the school is not attending to all the needs that they see. But there's what are you doing to contribute to that? Just because there's not school and prayer, how many of those people that would say that maybe didn't sit down with their children that morning and pray with them? So I thought it was a good quote, something to look at. Parents are responsible first for their own direction. Ultimately, as they become adults, you are not responsible for your children's direction. But if we set them up for success now, then they'll go the way that they should as they get older. It is true that you're responsible for the influence you have on them. You have a responsibility to bring them up and nurture them in the Lord. You can influence the set of their sails, but they are responsible for their decisions as adults. So if we go to A underneath block 1, that first element is focus. Has anybody here ever been to the Cadam range? Bought a new weapon? You want to make sure you get your focus right. Otherwise, you're not going to hit the target. And it doesn't happen with just one shot. You kind of have to take a number of shots and make sure that you're getting right on target so that you know that when you're going to shoot something that it's accurate and you have something that you can go off of and say, okay, this has been sighted in. Just like we need to sight our lives in the decisions that we make as we're raising our children, we must work on that focus. The devil has many ways to ruin our children. One of the best ways is to get ourselves as parents off focus. A father backsliding or a mother becoming bitter has a powerful influence on the children. Just like if you leave church and then as soon as you get in the car, you start saying, I can't believe so-and-so said this in the church. Then your children are going to be like, oh, okay, well, that's how I'm supposed to act. But what do we call that? What is that called? Gossip, right? It's hypocrisy. So we really need to take stock of how we act in front of our children and setting that right example for them and keeping that focus. Because things like that are what's going to detract from our witness and for raising our children up the right way. In Nehemiah's day, the people of Judah were focused on the rubbish from the wall that they were building. They allowed the problems to cloud their vision from what the building of the wall would mean to their children. Keep the focus on your personal relationship with Jesus, because that's what's most important. If we go down to B, that second one is faithfulness. You need to make the determination that no matter what, you're going to be faithful. Faithful. A was focus. Being faithful. Doing daily devotions with your children, reading the Bible, praying together, coming to church on Sundays and Wednesdays. That faithfulness is important as we're raising our children up. There will be times when you don't want to do the things that you know are right. Make the commitment that even though life feels like it's getting in the way, you're going to be faithful to God and to raising your children in a Christian home. If you're not faithful in reading and studying the Scripture, you're leaving the door wide open to failure in your own life. You'll dry up spiritually unless you're spending time in the Bible regularly, and your children need to know that the Bible is a priority in your life. They need to see you read it and hear you talk about it. I think you should still have that private time. You should have like a family devotion, but that private time where you're reading it and praying, but we also need to be praying together as families and reading the Bible together. And then down in C is fervency. There are too many passive Christians, Christian parents in our day. You must stay actively involved in your home and stay actively involved in the church. Be fervent in every role in your life, every opportunity that you're given. It's interesting to think about how far our country has gone, but our founding fathers were very loyal to Jesus. You can go back and look at all the documents, and they were Christians and how they set everything up. They had a desire to raise up a nation for their children and their children's children. They had a spirit that would not stop. They were not willing to settle for passive living, and we need that spirit back today. We need it in our homes and our churches, and we just don't want to go through the motions. Just kind of like, okay, well, this I got to get to here, and just kind of like going through the motions of everything else. We just need to be staying active in our walk. Now, if we go to section 2, this one is fight your flesh. And we'll have the subsets in there. You're in a battle with your old nature constantly. The flesh desires to do wrong. It has an appetite for evil. Even though you are saved, you still have that old carnal nature. In Galatians 5:16, it says, "This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh." Far too many Christian parents are allowing the flesh to win the battle rather than walking in the Spirit and claiming the victory. And there's 3 primary areas we're going to look at. Primary area 1, and that would be letter A, is anger. That's that old carnal nature rising up to the top when you act in anger. I know myself, I had a problem with anger when I got back from Iraq. And it took me about a year till I sat back and realized, I was like, I'm not doing anyone any favors with this, because I was just had a real short fuse. And with the kids, I had a low threshold for things that would get on my nerves, and it wasn't right. And I don't know what it had to deal with, if it was from being in a war zone or whatever. But I kind of just, at one point, I had to step back and say, this isn't doing anybody any favors. My children don't want to be around me, and I had to take stock in that. But sometimes it's hard to see that unless someone's pointing it out to you. And anger, we shouldn't deal with our children in anger. We should set those, they need parameters. They need to know, this is what's okay. So if you say you can't do this, then you need to follow up with, if they do something that's wrong, you need to be consistent so that they know what to expect. Because you're going to frustrate the child as well if you're not consistent with saying, okay, well, I'm going to let it go this time. Well, then they don't know when you're going to enforce it. And so that's going to provoke the child to anger if you're not consistent as a parent. So they need those clear, established, you can do something in here, and if you go outside of that you're going to follow through and correct them. So we need to control our own anger, and we need to not provoke our children to anger. And in B, we have apathy. Parents who aren't involved in their children's lives are failing them. You want to take the time to teach your children and get involved in their lives so they know that you're going to be there consistently with them. Many times we get tired and give up, but you need to take your children to church. Don't send them. So, it's one of those things where it should be a joy that we get to come to church together as a family, not just we got to go make it. Hurry up! We got to just fit this into our busy schedules. Care enough to get involved and make a difference in the lives of your children. If you care enough to get involved, we just don't want to be sitting by and watching them do wrong. Know what's going on, build those relationships, and explain the reasons for the rules. Show your children that you care. The best way that you can do that is to invest time in their lives. And some people would say the way to spell love is T-I-M-E, right? That's how you show your children that you care about them, is spending the time with them. And then in block C, we have absenteeism. There was a time in the country when children could count on a physical presence of both parents being around. It's not to say if both parents work that it's a bad thing, but in the time that you do have with the children, they really need to know that you're there for them. Not just, hey, we're going to sit around the dinner table and everybody's on their own smartphones or tablets. They really want to know that you're there for them and that you're there to invest the time in them. Family life is challenging. The temptation is to focus on other things rather than the needs of your children. But it's important to work hard to provide for those needs of your family. So like I said, we don't need to feel guilty if both parents have to work. That doesn't make you an absentee parent, but you need to be fully involved when you are there. Take advantage of the time you have. Turn off the television and interact with your kids. I saw it was a great sight the other night. We haven't had neighbors for 3 years where we live. So I'm getting used to having neighbors again. But after dinner, some of the neighbor kids and our kids, they were all out playing horse. Everybody know that game? Basketball? And I was just like, it's the street lights are on and they're just shooting hoops. And I was like, hey, they're not sitting around playing video games or watching TV. It's just, it's nice to see. I feel like I see a lot of times I walk by, maybe in the BX food court, there's a lot of people and families together, and everybody's on their own tablet or smart device. And it was kind of nice just to see kids out playing basketball and enjoying themselves. So remember, the prodigal son wanted to go home. It was a place where he knew his father loved him. He turned his back on everything that he was taught, and then he went out into the world. But when he finally came back to his senses, he didn't have any doubt about where he wanted to be. He returned to his father's open arms. And so when you invest that time, the children are going to know that you're there for them. And then we'll go into our last category here is fight the corruption of our society, in our society. So corruption is the blank you're looking for. There's no question that our society is filled with sin. Just turn on the news, look around. It doesn't take long to see. The answer to the corruption that we see around us is not to withdraw into isolation. We should be separate from the world, but we can't not be in the world. Everywhere you go, not everybody's saved, and we need to be good witnesses to them as well. We can't just set up a fortress and live off on our own and just, because we're supposed to be going out into the world and preaching the gospel to every creature. But we need to be careful about how we interact with society. So how can we interact with society in this corrupt world that's just filled with sin? Letter A, we have through prayer. We need to be praying for America and to have godly leaders that are in place. Pray for your children's teachers, their classmates. Pray for them to be good witnesses. A lot of that time spent in prayer, God hears it, and we need to be praying for the right things. Like I said, in school, just like if there's not prayer in school, it's not up to the teacher to raise your child. That's up to you. So if they're not getting something from school, then you need to fulfill it at home. And one of those ways that we can help is through prayer. There's a great answer to our problems as a society lies not in the voting booth, but in the prayer closet. We have a responsibility to be fully engaged in society. And Dr. Curtis Hudson said, there's more you can do after you pray, but there's nothing you could do until you pray. So I thought that's a good quote to know. And in B, we have through soul winning. Every Christian should be involved in sharing their faith. And then these are questions to take stock. Do your neighbors know that you're a follower of Jesus? Do your coworkers recognize that? Because the power of salvation is the gospel changing people from the inside out. Soul winning is one of the most effective things you can do to impact the world in which your children live. There's a lot of things that, we went back to with the focus of our Christian life and making sure that we're doing the right things. If our walk doesn't look right, then our witness is going to be off. So that's one of the things why we have focus back in the beginning, because if our walk doesn't look right, then our witness isn't going to be right. It's going to be hard to witness to people if you're in the bar drinking every night. And then our last one there in C, through involvement in the community. There's a lot that we can do to get involved in our communities. We have a responsibility to be active in our communities, know what the issues are, and strong believers should be running for office, and we should be in the voting booth putting them forward. And if we have a venue where we can do that, then we should take advantage of it as well. There's a lot of ways to get involved in the community, and then as you're getting involved in the community too, you might want to throw some of the people a tract. They see that you're doing well to help the community out, and then that's a good opportunity to open up to witnessing to them. So in conclusion, just as in Nehemiah's day, we're in the midst of a battle. The future of our children depends on our willingness to recognize and fight the battle for them. We need to get involved in the lives of our children, fight our spiritual battles, fight our flesh, and fight the corruption in our society. We need to take the tools God has given us to build walls of protection around our children. We must not allow anything to distract us from this vital task, and we need to determine that by God's power, we will do what it takes to succeed as Christian parents. I'm usually teaching Sunday school for the preschoolers, so I don't know how we conclude this. Do we go over anything else? Okay. Brother Tim, would you close us in prayer?